Good evening and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Bronxville Planning Board. So I'm calling this meeting to order, but the first order of business here is to approve the minutes from the last time we met, which was back in November. Has everyone read the minutes? Does anyone have any corrections or thoughts on that? Could I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I so move.
So, James, second? Leslie? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes. Great. So we'll come on to the first order of business of the day, since we had the 39 Dusenberry Road was postponed. We're going to move on to the site plan approval for Stoneleigh Plaza and the proposal for the future terrace enclosures. Is someone here from the applicant who'd like to speak? Could you go to the mic and identify yourself? And great, super.
Hi, my name is Benson Gillespie. We are the architect for the building and this application.
Okay. Is there anything you?
So there are two main options that we're allowing, that we're proposing that the building has to choose from should they want to enclose their terrace. One option is to infill the terrace with a set of sliding windows, and the next option is to screen in the terrace with a screened-in porch option. Now, as I said, some of the terraces are currently open, others have been enclosed with double-hung windows, and others have screens already.
So you can't just have open railing, you have to enclose it with something?
If they want to. You can keep the open railing if you want, and a lot do. It's just some tenants have voiced a desire to enclose or to screen in. And so we're providing the options that are acceptable to the building and hopefully to the city to do so.
And is the board allowing either one of these three options?
Yes.
Okay, so that's, because I
Yes.
haven't heard from the board at all on that.
Okay. Yes, these were all reviewed and certainly approved by the board prior to. And to the degree it's helpful, this is an example of what's currently here on a lot of the floors, where you just have the guardrail. And on my side is what the windows would look like, and some plans down below. You can see full enclosure, corner post.
And that's weatherproofed and heated?
Yes, yeah, it'll be insulated, weatherproofed, yeah, it'll
Okay.
fully functioning window in that regard. It'll have child guards to prevent anything greater than 4 inches from opening unless you provide the waiver allowing you to open it completely, proving you don't have any children in the unit itself. And we're going to clad the base down here with stucco in the same manner that the rest of the building is, so that it marries back with the texture and the look of the rest of the facade.
So are the floors leaking? Is that why they need to be sealed?
I'm sorry?
Okay, so all of these, if you stack them,
Right.
I read in the application that when someone wants to sell their unit, they have to take, before they
If they-
actually transfer the unit, the
Thank
floor
you.
has to be sealed.
If
So are
they-
they leaking?
So they aren't. It's a desire by the building to have this as the new standard and uniform look for all the balconies. So if you have a unit that is currently enclosed with the double hung windows that are currently there, they have to take them out and put in these windows so that it all matches going forward. Because this has the sliders will have a different look. The double hungs have that transom bar.
And that's a condition of sale.
Condition of sale, yeah, exactly. So a double hung, there are 4 double hungs right now, and then 2 around the corner. But in a double hung, you have that transom bar across the middle because it's a double hung instead of a slider. So this also allows for a little bit less framing, a little more views.
great.
And how many units are we talking about? Like 15 units? What,
74 units? Okay. There are a lot
that
of,
ha- that have these corner,
Oh, no.
yeah,
The whole
that,
complex is 70.
so I would say between
How many are it?
maybe 15 to 20. I'd have to double check. There are a number of corners, but
Yeah, I wouldn't-
a lot less than 74.
right, so it's all,
I'd say 20, 25% at most of the units.
Are corners?
Of the 74 terraces are currently closed. But you were asking how many terraces, how many units have terraces in the building?
Well, it says 74. There
Okay.
are 74 terraces, and 50% of them are enclosed. So that's in the application.
I think some may have 2 terraces.
So my only question to you, because as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of a good thing, but are you looking for uniformity? Is the building looking for?
time.
Over time, the building's,
Over time for those that want more space, that want an enclosed terrace. Yeah. And that's why we're also creating the standards so that down the road, when people want to enclose or they want to screen in, well, there's no discussion.
you have to do it a
It's
certain.
not what it is.
Yeah.
It's this, take it or leave it.
Instead of a mishmash.
Exactly, yeah.
And this
So they
is,
don't have to come back to us.
so this is a co-op, right? So these, according to the co-op, the rules of the co-op, they wrote this into their bylaws. Do you know?
I will ask, I do not
Yes.
know, but, okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's gonna be part of that.
from our standpoint, it doesn't matter, but from a legal standpoint for, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Should look nice, be a big improvement. You've done a good job.
It's back.
So, having heard from the architects on the project, I'd like to hear from the DRC. Is there anyone here from DRC who can speak to this proposal? Like to add anything or more than you guys put in your minutes?
yeah, I was not at the meeting, so I know what I know from the minutes.
So seeing no one here to speak to that, we'll move on. I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone here from the public who'd like to add their 2 cents? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and discussion on this review plan. Any thoughts, ladies and gentlemen?
It seems like they want to improve things and make them more uniform. It doesn't seem very controversial.
So can I have a motion for approval of this site plan?
I'll move that.
Second?
And James, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for coming in. Good luck with this project. I doubt it, but
Never know.
you never know. That's true. The next item on the agenda is 71 Pondfield Road, Corcoran's Legends Realty. Is there someone here from the applicant who'd like to speak? No? What are they expecting? Oh, okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I was at the DRC meeting for this
Yeah.
application. It was uncontroversial. We approved it, we recommended that it be approved at DRC. It was a very simple design. I think it's a black awning with white letters,
Yeah, I saw them.
so nothing
No.
controversial.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good night.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Not much to discuss here. Anyone else have any thoughts? No. Can I hear a proposal to accept this approval for the Corcoran's Legends Realty at 71 Pondfield Road, the awning approval.
So moved?
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay, that one's done. Moving on, we've come to 182 White Plains Road, Iona College, Stein Hall. Someone from the applicant is here to speak. What do you know? Please, at the mic, just identify yourself and
Yes, I'm
you can
Mary-
take your mask off so we can see.
I've had exposure, so I don't want to.
Okay, it's up to you. Fine.
Uncomfortable or put anyone at risk. I'm Mary Claire Riley. I lead marketing and communications for the college. I think I've met some of you, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have. We're interested in hanging 2 banners from Feth Hall. I think you have the renderings, right?
Yeah, actually, I was referring to Stein Hall, but,
Oh, Stein. I thought
yeah,
that was.
Stein first, then Feth. We'll move, well, we can lump them together if you like.
Oh.
Anything to add to, no?
I don't think there was any questions. I think it was answered there, but if you have any questions about it, we're just looking to do some minimal branding and reflect Iona College in the sign on the conservatory, changing only the color, really. And then on this building here, having two long, narrow hanging banners flanking the 2 sort of like pillars on the outside.
Right. And are you going to do anything with the stone Concordia College?
On the front of that building there,
Yeah.
we were not planning to.
You're referring to, there are also 2 stone things
the
along
stone.
White Plains Road. There
Oh,
are 2
the-
low stone,
Below.
yeah.
On that building, right above the front door, there's also, it says Concordia.
Right.
And there, we're not planning to touch that on that
Okay.
building, but on the stone, like arch, or
Yeah.
the curved signs, we are planning to replace it and have it say Iona on there rather than Concordia. But we have samples coming, and we're basically just looking to power wash, replace it, match what's there now, but obviously different letters.
Okay. Thank you. Well, you were at this meeting, weren't you?
I was, yes.
And you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing, maybe Mary Claire, you could also address this because it came up in the meeting, the DRC meeting, is on the banners, the relationship between the banners and the architectural features of Feth Hall, if you could just
Sure,
explain that.
Joe, my partner can speak more specifically to the exact measurements, but our aim is to have it sort of like blend in so that it's not covering the architectural features, like it would be right above that, the line that goes across the column, if you will.
Right. So they basically extend from one edge of the molding all the way down to the edge that runs along the top of the doorway.
Right.
So that's the kind of, the area that it's covering. If you make it smaller, then it looks kind of odd because it's cut off, it would end right in the middle of that course going down. Also, these banners are consistent with the ones, if you've driven past the campus on North Avenue, it's, in terms of the design and the branding, it's all consistent.
Yeah, the question I had, and you must have discussed this at design review, but had to do with the scale of the banners, because, I've gone by on Kimball, the entrance to Sarah Lawrence, and I've gone by on North Avenue, the entrance to the main Iona campus, and it hasn't felt like, these are, I think, 3 feet by 15, they're substantial. It just hasn't seemed like in those locations I've seen something that's akin to this in scale. The branding is consistent, but the scale seems out of scale to what I've seen elsewhere, so that's the question.
I think maybe you're referring to the interior building, like McSpadden Hall? Is that what you mean? Because those are pretty much similar to like the long, narrow banners that are between the pillars on the inside. So if you just drive on North Avenue, you wouldn't see that. It's the on the other side of the building, where it's like, that's the main entrance.
But are those this large? Because I tried going on Google Maps to look. I didn't see anything of this scale, even on the interior of the campus.
I don't know if it's in Google Maps, but I can certainly show you pictures of McSpadden Hall. It's one of our most photographed spots on campus.
Mm-hmm.
So I can share those if you like.
Mary Claire, thank you. Paul, how does this apply to the sign requirements in the village statutes?
It doesn't comply with the sizing.
So then why are we really even discussing this? If it's the village code, as I recall, does not allow signs.
Yeah, I mean, it's not compliant, it would need a variance, according to the zoning.
Right, because if we start putting up signs here, we can put them up anywhere, with the hospital, with the school. I'm a little perplexed here, why we're reviewing signs when we have an ordinance that says we're not allowed to have them.
Yeah. I mean, technically it should be referred to zoning for a variance, and if it doesn't fit within the size limits that are set.
I appreciate that design review has looked at this, and I'm sure that perhaps they weren't aware of the code as it stands, and when they looked at it, because from just a aesthetic point of view, it's not, but it sets a precedent, is what I'm concerned about. And if you allow this sign, then you're supposed to allow signs everywhere. And it is in the village code that they shouldn't be there. So, I mean, we had this issue when Concordia put up the stone pediments to say to announce it's Concordia College at one end and the other. And there was a long discussion about the fact that those were signs, but because of the way they were put together and set up, they were, they gave an allowance for it. But these are real signs. So I'd like clarification on that if I could, before I further this application.
Who would issue the variance? Would it be zoning? Or?
Zoning would issue a variance.
Yeah, you would, at this point, the planning board would refer to zoning.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
And would we approve it, or if we approved it, do we have the ability to approve it, subject to zoning issuing the variance, or do we not have the authority to approve it at all?
Well,
No.
I mean, it would depend on the proposal someone made. I mean, if it was conditioned on approval, that's, something the board would decide to do or not do.
The procedure, as I understand it, would be to recommend it to zoning with, we can give it a blessing or not. And we can just, non-committal, send it to zoning and see how it applies to the zoning law. But I do have an issue with signage because, as I say, at Stein Hall, Concordia's got the music school has got a big following within the village, so there was not a lot of discussion about them putting up a sign, but in fact, it is against the law, or against the village codes. So, and as I say, if they do it, then the next person does it, then, all of a sudden you're gonna have, people can put up signs all over the village.
Have there been other variances, sign variances recently?
That's a good question, Leslie. I couldn't answer it, really. I just, I bring it up, not to be a killjoy here, but to say that, we're rushing ahead into something that we aren't fully really apprised of the full situation. And I honestly don't think that DRC was aware of it as well, because otherwise, because they didn't see a problem with it from a design standpoint.
Well, also, I think we looked at it in terms of the fact that Concordia had signs, and, you know, with respect to Stein, certainly, that's literally, I think, the same size sign, it's just a different color. The
Correct.
Concordia Conservatory logo is exactly the same.
You're referring to the second sign, not
Yeah, the
this
one on,
right,
in the
understood.
white in Stein Hall across the street.
Yeah.
Right.
And with respect to, and I think we kind of, you know, I think the reason why there are no signs is because that is zoned residential, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think everyone just I would hope, would agree, and again, there may be some procedural hurdles we have to go through, but I would hope everyone would agree that it's appropriate for Iona College to have a sign.
As I say, in the village code, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm just quoting it off the top of my head, there is you know, prohibition against signage. And so we're kind of treading in basically unknown waters. I really don't want to move an application like this forward without having a full understanding of what we're stepping into.
Yeah, you know, I think what's a little different is it is in the residential zone. Most of our sign code is really designed for the, you know, the commercial area downtown. So it doesn't really fit in that regard. But it doesn't comply with the size criteria set up in the sign code. If the board felt that, you know, this was accepting to you, or there was a you know, proposal that was acceptable to you, you could give that opinion to zoning, so they had a little bit of direction from you. But that, again, that's just up to the board.
Paul, what size sign would be permitted under the code, would you happen to know? And I'm really referring to the 3x15s, you know,
Yeah, there's really nothing that's
They're not going to give you a size.
yeah.
It's like,
Or,
it's like political signs you can put up a certain period of time before an election, and they have to come down after an election.
Yeah,
Those are allowed, that type of signage.
right, but this type of signage really doesn't.
No, and it doesn't pertain to that, and it's permanent, you know, once you give granted a variance, it's gonna stay up there.
Yeah, and, you know, the dimensional requirements in the sign regulations are designed for the business district. They're not designed for you know, a college campus where the building in question is set back, you know, fairly far away from White Plains
And a lot
Road.
larger, too, than,
And in terms of, you know, it's just a completely different, you know, animal. We don't have anything like that on Pondfield Road, so.
Right, but again, the thing that strikes me as analogous is the entrance to Sarah Lawrence campus as you come up Kimball, and that has something that's much more analogous to the, you know, stone signs that are currently there at Concordia. It's sort of a low-rise, wide sign that alerts you to the presence of the campus without, you know, having this more dramatic position.
And with the metal letters they've got.
They've just got metal letters in front of a bush, yeah.
Yeah, I think, it's, you know, it's just a question of, in a sense, how do you want them? From my standpoint, it's a can of worms. If you open it up, it can go a lot of places where you don't think about it. And whether or not it's, you know, 100 feet back from Route 22, White Plains Road, they're big purple signs that say, it's just not in keeping with the rest of the village, I don't think, frankly. That's my own opinion. And I hear what you're saying, but I also don't want to, you know, interject into a code that's been worked on, and that, you know, you don't know what's coming along the pike, what's next.
Paul, had you found something that,
Yeah, I mean, like, again, this is really, it's targeted towards.
Understood.
There, but like, you know, informational signs, not more than a square foot, and surface sort of that, if I, I apologize if I had gone through this, maybe I could have given you that more detail, but I think in most ways it doesn't apply, it's just way bigger than what's allowed. But, in defense of the application, our code really isn't designed for this type of application.
Yeah, but maybe it should be.
So I don't have anything else to go by.
Right. But according to that, from what I could read from here, it's not compliant. So to me, it's an open and shut case. But I'm one vote on this committee.
If we don't, a procedural question.
Yes.
If we don't proceed with this, then it automatically goes to zoning, or what? What's the next step?
No, we have three options. We
Okay.
can approve it, we can turn it down, we can refer it to zoning for further review. We can do that with a recommendation, negative or positive.
If we turn it down, can they still go to zoning, I guess is my question.
If we turn it down, they're done.
So they have no signs?
These signs don't work. Now, they have the stone signs, because they're there, and they're grandfathered. They can change those to I go into college.
Yeah, the ones on the stone, what I told them is if it's the same font, same everything, they can just change the name.
Yeah.
And what about the conservatory sign?
We haven't looked at that.
Well, the conservatory's essentially the same thing. They put up a sign without coming to us, and frankly, they were in violation of the code when they put up that sign on their front porch.
But the driveway signs were approved? That we're saying they can just replace the letters? Those were approved? But how could those be approved if signs are prohibited in that district?
What do you mean, the driveway?
The ones,
stone
the
You're saying there
stone
must have
ones.
been variance at
Yeah,
that
yeah,
time
yeah.
that
How could
permitted
how can those be permitted, but
They got a variance because of the type, and the design review at the time, if I remember it, because I was on this board at that time, was very adamant about how they were built and what they could look like. Because they came with a number of different designs at the time.
so they got a variance from zoning?
They got a variance from, I believe, well, it went from here to zoning, and then it was.
So that's kind of that's.
But this is
the
totally
establishment.
different. This is totally different.
No, but that's that's
That's the
precedential
procedure.
procedure.
That's the
That's been
procedure.
established, so maybe, I don't know, it seems like if that's what we've done in the past, and that,
But there's a big difference between banners and a stone sign that's, these, flop in the wind, and another one is,
completely agree. I'm just saying, in terms of process,
yeah.
the process, it sounds like, that we've adopted, or the village has adopted before, is to, and I don't know whether, when the stone signs were done, whether there was any recommendation given by the planning board to zoning when it was sent to zoning, but it did require a variance, and it did go to zoning.
Yes.
And so
As
that,
I recall.
it sounds like that, is the established process.
I'd have to pull a file to
Yeah.
say specific.
I mean,
I know
it
they
was
have
at least
approved.
15 years ago, And I've been on this board for 15 years, and I remember it, so it was within that time period, 10 to 15 years ago. But, see, my issue here is, one, the code, and two, where does it lead to? And I don't think it's in keeping, from my standpoint, with the village, or with what, keeping, so Concordia was this small neighborhood college that's been there for over 100 years, right? The footprint has been pretty much the same for that entire time. It's really been it's changed its nature. And I understand, it's a business like any other business, whatever you want to say, it's still a business. And they're putting up signage. And if we want to turn this into the Eastchester Mall, we can turn it into the Eastchester Mall. But if we want to maintain the character of the village, I think we have to think very carefully about the code, why it was written, and how these signs affect that.
Going along Route 22, it's a particularly visible, location. Again, I keep bringing up Sarah Lawrence because it's so analogous. When you come along Kimball, the way they've chosen to do that in a residential neighborhood is very much in keeping with the neighborhood, and this just didn't have the same feel as what they're doing at Sarah Lawrence.
It's awfully odd, though, to have this big sign for the conservatory and then have the college be anonymous.
But
I mean, in some way, people need to know what's there. I mean,
well, first of all, those little signs that are right on the edge of the sidewalk, where they announce a concert or such and such, and they have their little stuff. Those were approved through zoning and through the planning board. But I do not recollect at any point in time when a banner that they hang on Stein Hall came through this board or was approved by zoning. I can't remember if it did. And I have the utmost respect for the music. I was on the board there. I believe me, I'm intimately involved.
no, I know this, yeah.
But I'm concerned because, we're running down a path here, and I don't want it to be a rabbit hole. You understand what I'm saying? Because you live right over there.
Yeah, no, so I break it down into procedural issues and substantive issues. I think I agree with you on the procedural issue, which is we don't have the authority, ourselves to issue an approval for this.
Not true. We have the authority to approve it or not approve it, or we have three options. We can approve it, we can decay it, basically, or we can send it to zoning with a recommendation, pro or con, and have them review it at vis-a-vis the code and whether it needs a variance. And if they approve it and say, okay, we'll give it a variance, and it comes back to us, and it's probably would be approved. But
Okay, so that's on the procedural
That's the
side.
procedural
On the
side.
substantive side, I guess, because I do live a couple blocks from there, I'm kind of, the Concordia sign, I'm kind of used to. I mean, it doesn't, I'm sorry, the conservatory sign.
right.
I don't, it doesn't really, I think it's, we reviewed it at DRC. I think it's, it's not, the colors are, subdued. They're Iona's colors, not the blue of Concordia, obviously. But I don't really think it's, I don't find it out of character with the village because there's been a sign there for as long as I can remember. So that's on the Stein Hall side. On the Feth sign, yeah, those are, there have not been signs like that on the Concordia campus before. So we can talk about that one. Personally, I thought they were tastefully done. I thought they, were not over the top. Again, they were the Iona color scheme. It was basically Iona College with the cross logo, at the bottom. And, I personally thought they were attractive. And again, it was not, I didn't find them to be, out of character with the nature of the use of the property as a college campus. So, but that's, I'm one member of the board, and you have a different view, so.
Well, it would be interesting to know when the banner in Stein Hall went up. Because did it just appear?
If I recall correctly, I think the only sign permits that I found in the records were for the stone piers. I don't think I found any other.
Or for the sign right at the end of the sidewalk, right?
No, on the other side of the street,
Oh, for the stone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these others just appeared.
Yeah, now, years ago, maybe they just did this, I
Understood. I do recall a discussion about the street sign. I don't recall any other discussion about the banners, whatever. But I do know, as you pointed out, in the code, it's not permitted. So the question for us is, you know, we have to go to zoning if we're going to approve it or recommend it for approval. We can, but it still has to go to zoning because they're going to need a variance. Correct in that?
Yes.
So before us, before this board, we have this is the way I would couch it. And I think Larry did a great job. It's procedural and aesthetic. We don't have to deal with the aesthetic. We have to deal with the procedural and what's in the code and how we want to deal with that. Because the other side, the aesthetic, is really, I may have an issue with it, somebody else may not have an issue with it.
Isn't it legitimate in our thinking about this to have a different perspective on it if the sign is 3 feet by 5 feet as opposed to 3 feet by 50 feet? If those two were sitting in front of us, isn't it legitimate for us to take that into account as we think about what procedure we'd like to see here? Well put, I would say, but I think, look, the applicant wants to move forward, I get it. We have a divergence of opinion, so we can do two things. We can say we need more information, we can kick it back that way, or we can send it to zoning, which is kind of kicking it down the road, and because they're going to just deal with it from a standpoint of variance. That's all they're going to look at it. They're not going to look at it from aesthetics. They're not going to look at it, they're going to look at it only from the standpoint of the code.
But they need to see, they need to have something to grant a variance. Like, they need to, they can send this design to zoning, right? Or they could send something else that we are, they have to send some, the question they go to zoning with is not, as a general matter, in theory, can we have a sign? It is, can we have this sign, right? And then zoning determines to issue a variance or not. So it seems like they need some guidance from us as to what we would be comfortable approving, particularly if it's going to come back to us, because then they've wasted more time going to zoning and then coming back to us and say, oh, actually, we don't like that design.
Well, that's a design review would come up. You guys like this design. You put it in your minutes and you were okay with the design. So I think we're just dealing with this particular design. Zoning, as they say, is really only, they may look at the design and how it, impacts, but they're really going to be looking at the code. That's what they really should be looking at. And the code is where I have a sticky point. Yeah, I'm not crazy about the design either, but to me, that's secondary. So how do we proceed here? Because we don't want to spend all night on banners, right? And but what I would say is, Leslie, how do you feel on this? I just want to.
Well, I think it's curious that the sign on this conservatory sign just appeared one day, and I'm new here, so I don't know. I mean, I would sort of question that, because in their minds, they're replacing something that's there with just their own colors. So, on the surface, that shouldn't seem like such a big deal, except for that maybe this was put up in the, in the middle of the night and didn't get approval from anyone, right? So that's sort of curious to me. And I guess my other question would be, was there, and this is maybe to Mary Claire, were there other types of branding that you considered other than the banners? I mean, I know I've been on a million college tours, I think we all have, and those are very common, right? In any school, banners on all sorts of things, right? But I know you're going to change the lettering to reflect Iona on the stone things, but did you consider any other types of branding, or is that really just where you know?
We did. I mean, my designer put a bunch of different options around. We honestly were trying to keep it sort of like in line with the architecture. It's like, it's not a purple, it's like a maroon color,
Right.
so it's meant to sort of blend into the brick, but stand out so that you can read what it is, but not have it be garish. Like, I really appreciate the aesthetics and my job is to make sure that it doesn't look bad. So that is where we thought we could have the, sort of like the most impact without making it garish or all over the place. So we were aiming to sort of simplify. We also thought about having one across the front there that I mentioned. Can I go point? Right here. But this actually says Concordia, so we were trying to kind of like leave that as, you know, a connection to its history. So that was the aim there. We have them on like the banners on the light posts. Excuse me. As we take, you know, take more, have more classes there, we assumed that we would add, you know, as buildings got named, that kind of thing, we would add more, but we wanted to at least let people know, you know, this is Iona.
So, and Mary Claire, I appreciate that, but that also brings me to a consideration for, we're moving from a sleepy teacher's college to a much more involved campus with a lot more activity than's been there for, certainly in my lifetime. So I just, I am concerned, you know, you can start, you know, is this the pebble that starts the avalanche? You know, that's part of my concern. So if we belie the code and we let this, what's the next thing that comes along? Because they've gone from, you know, 200 students to 500 to 1,000 to, you know, and it's, whatever the merits are, it's still a residential neighborhood.
And it's still a college campus.
Yeah.
As a college campus, I don't know how you can have a college campus with no signage.
And what about the scoreboard? That's a sign. I mean, it seems to me that the purpose of the zoning rule was to control the visuals of the downtown area. And I think it's, you know, in terms of interpreting the intent of the zoning laws, I think it's, you know, if I were on the zoning board, I would think that a building like this, far away from the business district, might not be what the zoning laws were intended to cover in the same way, and I could see a variance having some value in that situation.
Yeah, the only thing I'd raise in that respect is, and you can correct me on this, we have no jurisdiction over the school whatsoever.
No,
And so
that's
there are
right.
some very interesting things that have happened with signage at the school that might or might not have,
The Bronxville
the
School.
Bronxville School, that might or might not really have been the kinds of things that
Yep.
this board would approve. So I wouldn't necessarily want to look at what's happened at the Bronxville School
No, there's
as precedent.
He's talking about.
Oh, you're talking about their
scoreboard.
Yeah.
scoreboard, not the one at
Right, no,
Bronxville School.
yeah,
Now I understand,
yeah.
thanks.
And, you know, what if they put up a flag on the flagpole that said Iona College?
They have a Ukrainian flag
Well,
flying right now.
we went into a long discussion, I don't think any of you were on the board at that time, about the color of the fencing around the baseball field. And I'm just saying, it was a discussion like this, and it was, they wanted something, they wound up with what they have now, so, and that, so, I get it, I understand, you know. Again, I look at this school as it's just a business, it's like any other business. They're there to attract students, sell a product, their product is their education that they provide. And to me, that's signage for a business in a non-business district. So I am of the opinion, and look, let's stop this. Let's just say that, let's remand it down to zoning to see how they deal with the zoning issue, with the code. And we can make a recommendation, or stay neutral if we like, and just hear what they have to say in terms of zoning and how it would impact, because of the zone it's in. Yes?
Chairman, also, possibly what you might want to consider is, when you do refer to zoning, is ask for some criteria so that in the future, that this property, has proposals that maybe they could give you some guidelines that they could be part of that approval, so that it wouldn't be every time they come up for something that we're in the same position.
Yeah, you mean, but if they want to put banners all over the campus, or flags, or, whatever.
I don't know, it might be a little too, obscure, but, maybe in their deliberation, they could come up with something that would help you next time, that's part of their variance that they get this time.
So, from an historical standpoint, I would say that Concordia has never been an easy applicant. Never. Over as long as I can remember. They've done things before they were allowed to do them. They did them in contradiction to how it was recommended. And I think part of what took place with the Stein Hall is just, we're going to do what suits us and not what, ask questions. It's, and I have a concern with that. I understand we're under a whole new administration. It's a new college. You guys aren't Concordia.
Yes.
You're Iona.
I really want to be clear, we are really committed to being great neighbors and are very excited to be part of the community and really want it to look very nice. And if you have thoughts, sorry. I don't know.
No, I would just say, Mary Claire, that we probably spent 5 years discussing the parking there. We've spent another couple of years on fields and rights of way and all kinds of stuff. And believe me, it was never an easy discussion. So not to belie and belabor you with any of that, and I understand it's a new administration, but I really would like to start off on a good foot with a clear intention, because I know you're going to be before us again with a number of issues that'll come up as you resurrect that campus, so to speak. And I just want people to be aware that this is...
Have any neighbors commented on this proposed signing?
There's nobody from the
Yeah,
public
okay.
here.
I didn't know if they came to.
But would there have been any notification?
Well, yeah, it's noted, their notice was put,
Okay.
right?
I don't know. I'm asking.
We didn't have notice for this?
There's nothing across the street. There's,
Oh, I got
The
you.
website.
Oh, within 500 feet, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing,
it's on the main road, so,
Right.
yeah.
okay,
Well, so I'm just, maybe I can
Back
take a
to
crack
procedure.
at a motion.
okay, yes.
So I would propose that I would make a motion to refer the application accompanied by the positive recommendation of the Design Review Committee to the zoning board for further action, and with the stipulation that if it's granted a variance by zoning, that it would return to us for final approval.
Someone want to second that? Or?
I guess the problem I have is if this board wouldn't approve it, then going back to zoning and coming back to us would be a bit of a waste of time of the zoning board. So I would say that motion I would second if it said, with our recommendation to approve it.
Right, but that's the portion that I think some of us would have an issue with, but
Right.
that may not be majority view.
Right, and then I think that's probably what,
Well,
We need to find out.
just in terms of discussion, you can second his motion, and then we can have a discussion on it. That's just Robert's rules, right?
sure.
then we can have a discussion. So you want to second his motion?
No, not as drafted.
Okay, well then, if nobody seconds your motion, then it
dies.
It dies.
Well, then I move
Okay.
that we refer this matter to the zoning board with a recommendation to approve it, or that we would approve it if they grant a variance.
How's it different from what I just, I mean, you're saying
Because
if.
you're saying that it
We
doesn't
would
then
only
have to come
approve it
back
if they
again.
grant it, you're saying we would,
He wants to refer it and with the
with a positive recommendation
Yes.
of us?
Yes.
So.
Exactly.
Right,
That's what he
okay,
wants.
okay.
So he needs a second.
I'll second it.
All right, discussion.
You know, not to belabor it, but I think given the nature of the application, I don't think I, would be able to support that.
Any other discussion before we take a vote on it?
Well, I sort of think the nature of the objections here is based on the design. And is that our job, or is that the design review committee?
No, it's our job. Design review makes recommendations. Okay? It's our job to approve or not approve. And I think what's before us right now in your motion, seconded by Larry, is to approve it, essentially, and remand it to zoning with our positive declaration, as opposed to a negative declaration. We've had, we're still in discussion on that. We can bring it to a vote.
Can I just ask a question? So Michael, it seems like you have an issue with the design,
Yeah.
right? And Gary, you have, your issue, it seems to me, is more a zoning question than the design. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But conceptually, you don't have a problem with the design if it fit with the
say that.
zoning? You don't? Okay. Okay, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I wasn't sure where you came out on that.
Yeah, no, I am not in favor of the signage.
In general?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think it's out of keeping. It's never been there in Concordia as long as, and I've lived in this village for 70 years, and it's never been signage like that, so. And it's not that I can't embrace change. I understand that change is part of life. And I understand that they want to publicize and say, hey, we're here. This is Iona now. It's not Concordia. It's a whole new gang, we it's like Steve Cohen buying the Mets. It's a new team, right? I don't know if it's a new team yet, but anyway, maybe that's the wrong analogy. So we have a motion, we can vote on it. So all in favor of the motion?
I think I'm the swing vote here, and I got to decide what I want to do.
You can abstain, all
Well, I don't wanna abstain,
opposed?
because that doesn't do any good, right?
Well, it just means the motion fails.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you can't vote again on a separate motion.
But I just feel like for this applicant, like we, to keep bouncing around, right, seems
But-
cruel.
Oh, Leslie, just
Yes.
as a reminder,
Yes.
as much as I appreciate the work that the applicant has put into this, that's not really our
Yeah,
concern.
no, you're right. You're right.
And because, we voted down things in the past, we've approved stuff that shouldn't have been approved, it's just part of what it is.
Right. Okay.
So we have
Thank
two
you. So noted.
yays, and, how, opposed?
No, no,
So the motion fails. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to the applicant? It just means that we have to, we can still remand it to zoning without, we can just have a neutral. We don't have to have a positive or a negative declaration. We can send it down to zoning for their opinion on the applicant's application versus the code. We can lump the two together, and they can come back to us with their recommendations. I would make a motion myself that we remand it to zoning with the minutes from the DRC so that they can see how the DRC looked upon it. And with this discussion, the minutes from this meeting, so that they get a handle on that, and they can apply the code. Now, that's a little long-winded for a motion, but one of you lawyers want to phrase it a little differently?
Can I ask 2 questions? One, if we go to the zoning and apply for a variance, but we know, would they be able to approve it, or it would come back to
It
you?
still comes back to us.
So, and you've already said you don't like the design, so
It's,
respectfully, I'm not sure
yeah,
what.
you're lost, right? I think some of us are lost here, too. But I'm just trying to stay with the code. If we goes to zoning, it's with the code. We can give it a negative declaration or a positive declaration. Either way, we've already voted down a positive declaration, but it still doesn't mean we can't remand it to zoning with the minutes from DRC there and the minutes from this meeting so that they can use that information and apply it to the zoning laws and the code, and then send it back to us and say, we don't have a problem with a zoning variance on this. And if they, then we would have a discussion again about the aesthetics, and you might be in a better position to have the whole thing go through. Because then there's no issue about the code, violating the code.
So is there any, if this was temporary signage, do we have to go through and file for a permit if it's just temporary?
You don't have to file anything further than you've already filed, right? I don't think.
Well, I think she's asking if she can get a temporary sign in now, which I'm not sure.
No. We can't do a temporary sign. Sorry about that. You could, as I said, has been brought up in this meeting, you could change those Concordia pillars and make them Iona College. That you could do without coming before us at all, because those are already approved. That's just a building department issue.
Right. So, well, that's planned anyway. But in terms of marking any of the buildings with any signs?
No, because, and what you're intimating to me here is that this sign, if you're going to market this building, are you going to market the library? Are you going to market the other Havermeyer Hall and all the other, or the basketball? I don't know where it starts. Where does it end? And
But don't we have to come before you each time we would do that?
well, you won't have to come back if zoning gives us a reply vis-a-vis the code, and then we have a discussion here and approve it from the planning board standpoint. You understand? Does everybody understand what I'm trying to get across here? So by the fact that it goes to zoning, zoning's going to deal with the code because they're looking for a variance. They're going to need a variance to put it up.
But do we want to end up at a point where it's a blanket approval and we don't hear about this again as things change substantially? Is that a place that we want to get to?
Well, that's, when it goes to zoning, they may come back and it may not look the same, right? They may say, listen, too big, make it smaller, we approve it. I think and I don't know about logistically, but it would seem like it's a good time to, when you go to zoning, to try and get some, blanket dimensions or something where.
Parameters.
Okay, you may still have to come back here, but they can use that approval that you just got from zoning to approve these new items.
Or we can limit it to just this.
Yeah.
And which is what we've done in the past, like we did with the bakery. We limited it to that. Now, I mean,
Well, yeah, so, right, I think, the other option, which is not an easy one, is if they change the zoning code.
but that would go through trustees.
Where it's allowed, but then you could make rules on top of it.
So it becomes like a special district it's a special zoning district of
Yeah,
the
you'd have to
village.
carve it out.
Yeah, that's not a, yeah,
That's, you know,
that,
much
yeah,
more than.
it's a multi-month process, yeah.
Because it has to go by the county.
But I think what Mary Claire is asking is when they go to zoning, do they have to go to zoning to get a variance for all of the signage they want to do?
If it doesn't comply,
Or do we
They
go
do it
through this
each-
process each time they want to
Yeah,
put a sign?
I would think it's each time, right? Unless the variance is a blanket one, which seems unlikely.
No, that's up to, when it comes back from zoning to us, we can approve it as a blanket approval, or we can approve it for a specific purpose. That's when it comes back to us.
You're saying it's up to us?
Yeah.
But
would be-
zoning will only approve what is applied for. They're not, right? I
it
mean,
will depend on their wording and their approval, really, I guess, right? They can
Right.
put in their approval that.
Conditional.
That, I'm not sure legally how that would be done, but it would make sense to me, because now they are going to have to do it, you're referring to this application, they could just do another application, I suppose, on top, going at the same time, to try to get some approval of sizing, maybe, something like that, or, the parts that aren't compliant with the zoning code, really, that's what they want to focus on, going to zoning. Because then when it comes here, you can rule on it, on the particulars that you want to rule on it, and you won't have to worry about referring it to zoning anymore. I guess that's where we want to get, so you don't
That's,
have to
I agree with you, Paul.
refer to zoning every time. That would make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And
That's
I can work with the applicant to try to, with our village attorney to try and guide that through the system.
So,
so did anyone second your motion? Did you
no,
finish
I'm
your
going to
motion?
rephrase my motion. I would like to remand, I make a motion to remand this application, both 5, 6, and 7, to zoning with the stipulation that they are provided with the DRC minutes from, that apply to this, and the discussion that took place tonight here, minutes from our meeting. I know it's involved, Christina, I'm sorry. And I'd like to do it without prejudice. That's my motion. Nobody's jumping to second it.
It does seem unsatisfying.
I'm just wondering if we should also ask that, whether this should come from us or it should come from the applicant, that zoning consider the applicant's future needs for signage on their college campus in addition to the signage that's specifically requested in the application.
So you would like to amend the motion to include a blanket
Yes.
approval? Do I hear a second on that?
I'm not sure what's intended by that, so that they would have sort of a blank check to put signage?
No, not a blank check, but that they would give guidance to the applicant in terms of parameters of what types of signage.
But then they still have to come back and say, now we want to put it on the library, but we've approved 3 by 5 instead of 3 by
Okay.
100. or
Yeah,
whatever.
so
So
what
that
you're
when they come
saying
back
is,
to us,
yeah,
we have the guidance from zoning as to what they've,
so you'd like to recommend that the zoning board provide us with parameters for future sign approvals on this location?
yes, correct.
Remember, we're remanding this without saying yea or nay, without prejudice. So we're not giving them our opinion on this. We're just saying, guys, look at it, tell us how it affects you and the code, and we'd like to make it easier for the applicant on a going forward basis, if that's the case.
Right. So we recommend they provide guidance for future applications,
If they're so inclined
if
to
they're so inclined to do so.
grant some form of.
How do you
variance.
feel about that, Mike?
It's not the motion I would have made, I guess.
Well, we can,
Well, is that your motion? Gary?
my motion's been twisted so much that maybe I'll leave it, let Michael make a motion here.
It's
And
too bad, because I was going to second your motion.
You were gonna second my
Yeah,
motion.
he's ahead of me, he's absolutely right.
All right, then
You can
second
second.
motion, because that's procedurally the
Yeah.
correct way to go.
Also,
think he's right.
I'll second the motion.
And then, okay, so the motion's been seconded, we've had a discussion, item. Let's have a vote.
And as I understand the motion, it's to refer this to the zoning committee with no recommendation, yea or nay.
Correct.
Full stop.
But accompanied by the minutes of the DRC.
Yes.
And this meeting.
Yes, okay.
And Christina, you've got all that, right? All right, okay.
She has.
And everybody's okay with that? So what's the vote? In favor?
That's fine, yeah.
Is that okay with you, Mike? No. Okay, 4-1.
Does he vote no, or does he abstain?
I vote no.
No.
He votes no. So
So can I
it's still
ask the
coming back to us.
Understood.
Yeah. Can I ask the applicant one last question?
Gary?
Yeah.
Are there difficulties that you foresee without having more signage than just the two, for want of a better term, pediments or curbstones?
Are there difficulties?
Yeah, what issues does that raise for Iona?
Well, I think that there's not a ton of contrast in the color of the letters and the stone, and it's low. I think it's easy to miss.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's part of the problem.
Well, you,
What part of the challenge that we would solve for, we're trying to solve?
you can put the colors in there,
I can put colors in the,
in the stone, right? Couldn't they? Or how does that work?
No, with the way
It has to be exactly the way it is, right? Yeah.
I can't change Iona's colors, but if there are things that you have like real issues with the aesthetics of this, is it not appropriate for me to ask, like, what are the challenges with it? Because I know I heard you say Sarah Lawrence, and so we'll go take a look there. But I also don't want to waste your time or our time if we're like, it's never gonna fly because we don't like this. I also don't want something that looks like a postage stamp on a big building. That just looks silly. I don't want the buildings to look silly.
It's the scales.
So scale and perspective ratios are important. But if there's guidance or something that says like, oh, if only they were on the inside column, or only if they were vertical versus horizontal, that would be helpful. I don't know what venue that would come from, but put it out there.
I think, Mary Claire, it's evident that there is a divergence of opinion on this board, and I think that anything that we can get in our hands that helps us to come to a consideration of this application would be more than helpful. And I think by going to zoning, that's part of the process that helps us. We'll be back again. We'll discuss this again. I don't know if people's minds will be moved or, opinions changed, but I respect the divergence of opinion. That much I really do, because I think it's important. It's important we have this discussion. And I wish I could make it easier, but we're kind of stuck with it. We've passed a motion, and we're going to send it back down to zoning, and we'll probably see you again here in May or something. But until then, the signs can't go up. And frankly, I would say that, Paul, you should be talking to Stein Hall about that sign as well. The banner. Because, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, so to speak. Sorry about my ellipsisms, whatever. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, seeing no other items on the agenda, our next meeting is May 11th. Thank you all for participating this evening.